Hey, this is Jeremy King, composer for Swift and Loose, and in this video I'll be going through a number of episodes and talking about my general approach to the soundtrack. Like what inspired the general tone, how the visuals and performances dictated the sound, and so on and so forth. I hope you all enjoy. Originally, the direction for the soundtrack was more specifically down-tempo, lo-fi, trip-hop music. So grungy, urban, that sort of feel. While I feel like things gradually drifted in other directions and differed from episode to episode, I always had that in the back of my mind, and I think that's most evident in tracks like Someone Like You, The Woods, and Down the Rabbit Hole. One song in particular that I found myself thinking about a lot while conceptualizing the music was The Fall, the outro theme to HBO's The Wire. It's got this wispy texture to it, for lack of a better description, and I think that goes a long way in capturing this urban feeling of danger and loneliness, if that makes any sense whatsoever. The influence might not be super apparent, but that sort of general mood was along the lines of what I wanted to achieve with the soundtrack. There's a lot of ambience sprinkled throughout the soundtrack where I was aiming for an almost ghostly, echoey feeling, which I tend to associate with smoke, mystery, and the general look and feel of the series as a whole. So the vast majority of the soundtrack was composed to picture. Marie shared early versions of each episode with me, in addition to recorded dialogue and sound effects, and I produced the music while watching and rewatching the scenes unfold. This was really helpful in getting a feel for the mood and timing of each episode. I listened through each episode a number of times with the dialogue and sound effects on and muted them to begin composing after getting a good sense of the atmosphere and key emotional beats from the voice actors. I can't stress enough how much the visuals guided the process. Take the opening to episode 4, for instance. I begin with some sort of distant, sort of lonely ambience for the establishing shot, then follow through with some minimal percussion once Wolf enters the scene. I stick with that up until Wolf mentions Tony, and as Harley's face softens, there's some more emotional chords that fade in just for that scene. The timing of the percussive hit when Wolf flicks the lights off transitioning into the next scene was also very deliberate. Later into the episode, when Harley rushes off to talk with Sean Barber, the piano kicks in, starting with a loose interpretation of Baa Baa Black Sheep. Because, Bar Black Sheep and all that. Afterwards, the piano sort of follows Harley and Sean's back and forth. In this case, the music may not necessarily work as well as a standalone track since it's so contextual, but my goal was to complement the cinematography and atmosphere here. This was my first time actually composing to picture, and it was really interesting and rewarding to explore the dynamic between animation and audio. It's an entirely different workflow than the usual music making process, and I really enjoyed it. While on the subject of episode 4, I felt like jazzier, more minimal ambient music worked best, whereas the rest of the series gravitates between more modern, urban music, unsettling ambience, and dark, down-tempo, lo-fi stuff. Starting with episode 6, I did something a bit different and structured the music around Hurting Human, which is the track that plays throughout episode 8. Episode 8's music was actually one of the earliest tracks I composed for the series, since I didn't compose for each episode sequentially. I wanted to lead up to the confrontation with Bambi through the music. To that end, the track that plays for most of the 6th episode is actually just a minimal version of Hurting Human. And the softer piano music in the 7th episode is also structured around the same song. When Harley begins piecing everything together near the end of the episode, there's a moment where a part of that track overlaps with the piano, which was, again, to foreshadow that confrontation. It's a bit subtle, but I think you can notice it. Episode 8 was an absolute blast to work on, and was actually the first episode that I composed entirely to picture. While the music itself is mostly the same emotional background chords and intense percussion, gradually rising in intensity throughout, starting with Bambi drawing her gun, there's a bunch of additional layers that enter in throughout the song to build upon that, and I tried to time certain whooshy sounds and transitions so that they synced up with the camera panning from Bambi to Wolf and back to Harley. Stuff like that. The eerie synth sound when Wolf's glove comes off is another example of specific timing. Again, I can't stress enough how much the visuals impacted the direction of the soundtrack. Without them, and without having the recorded dialogue to use as a reference, I don't even know how the music would have come out sounding. I hope everyone enjoyed the soundtrack, and I'm hoping we're eventually able to do a second season of the show. I really valued the experience of collaborating on this series, and I was glad to see it get such a warm reception, which it should have because it's awesome. For anyone interested in downloading the soundtrack in its entirety, I've uploaded it to Bandcamp, and you can download it all at the link displayed on screen. And that's all from me. Thank you and goodbye.